The weakest species in the galaxy. The first time humanity set foot in the grand chamber of the Intergalactic Council, the hall fell into an uneasy silence. It was not the silence of awe but the silence of skepticism. Thousands of species had walked these halls, giants whose fists could shatter stone, ethereal beings who bent gravity at will, aquatic leviathans with armored hides that deflected plasma, and insectoid empires whose hive minds communicated faster than light itself. Compared to them, the delegation from Earth looked laughably ordinary. They entered wearing simple uniforms, no shimmering aura, no psychic resonance, no energy radiating from their bodies. Just men and women, fragile flesh and brittle bones, standing on two unsteady legs. Their hearts beat too fast, their lungs required oxygen at an alarming rate, and even their skin bore scars from injuries that never quite healed clean. To the galaxy, they were not warriors. They were prey. One counselor from the Car Collective leaned toward his neighbor and whispered, "These things are weak. If not for their machines, they would not survive a single cycle on my world." Another, a towering Xorathi with crystalline wings, chuckled in agreement. Perhaps the galaxy invited them for entertainment. But humanity did not come for entertainment. The lead ambassador, a graying woman named Helena Cross, stood tall in the center of the chamber. She was not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most brilliant scientist of her people. But she carried something intangible in her voice, a calm conviction that silenced even those who mocked. "We come not with gifts of power," she declared, her words translated into 1,000 tongues. "We have no wings to fly, no scales to resist fire, no telepathic bond to unite our thoughts. We are fragile, breakable, and imperfect. But we are here." Her words echoed across the chamber, but the council was unmoved. A dozen representatives stood to object. "What can you offer us, fragile ones? You cannot even survive the harshest worlds without your machines. You are no warriors. You are no rulers. You are insignificant." And in many ways, they were right. Back on Earth, children still starved, wars still scarred landscapes, diseases still claimed lives. Humanity was not perfect. But what the galaxy mistook for weakness hid something else, something that had not yet been revealed. For thousands of years, humanity had survived without claws, without fangs, without natural armor. They survived because they learned. Because they adapted. Because they refused to give up even when the world tried to break them. Humanity did not need superpowers to endure. They had fire in their minds, stories in their hearts, and a will that bent the impossible. And so, while the council dismissed them as irrelevant, a storm was brewing on the edges of the galaxy. The Xorathi Dominion, a warlike empire feared by all, had begun moving its fleets toward council space. Worlds that boasted warriors stronger than steel and empires older than human civilization trembled at their approach. When the council demanded every species contribute champions to resist the invasion, the laughter returned. Who will Earth send? Children with sticks. Fragile bones to shatter under Xorathi claws. But Helena Cross answered with the same calm conviction as before. "We will send our best. Not our strongest, not our fastest, not our most gifted, but our best." And when the humans marched onto the training grounds beside the galaxy's most powerful champions, their ordinariness was undeniable. Their bodies tired. Their skin bruised. Their bones fractured. They bled. They faltered. Yet every time they fell, they stood again. And that, though no one yet realized it, was humanity's first demonstration of their true gift. The trials of the ordinary. The training grounds of the Intergalactic Council stretched across a continent-sized space station, a labyrinth of hostile environments designed to test the worth of any who sought the Council's recognition as defenders of the galaxy. Here, the atmosphere shifted from molten deserts to frozen wastelands in moments. Gravity fields surged from crushing heaviness to weightless void, and combat arenas pitted contenders against holographic beasts from 100 worlds. Humanity's delegation stood small in comparison. 20 men and women from Earth, none with extraordinary talents beyond their minds and bodies. Fragile, imperfect bodies. To the other species gathered, they were curiosities at best, sacrificial lambs at worst. The Car Collective sent warriors clad in obsidian armor, their claws sharp enough to slice through starship hulls. The Xorathi glided into the arena with crystalline wings, glowing with refracted light, their songs capable of shattering stone. The Xorathi hive unleashed bioengineered champions that could regenerate severed limbs in moments. And humanity. Humanity came with bruises that stayed, bones that once broken would take weeks to mend, and muscles that ached after too much strain. They carried nothing but simple tools, their eyes sharp and watchful, their hearts steady. The first trial was survival in the fire wastes, a searing desert where the air shimmered with heat and storms of molten glass raged across the dunes. Most species relied on their natural defenses. The Ka's armored hides, the Xorathi's heat-resistant wings, the Xorath's adaptive carapace. The humans sweated. They burned. Their lips cracked, and their skin blistered under the merciless sun. But unlike the others, they worked together. Helena Cross and her team built crude shelters from the wreckage of trial debris. They dug trenches to hide from the glass storms. They rationed their limited water with a discipline that shocked the observers. When one human stumbled from heat exhaustion, the others carried them. When supplies ran low, they improvised filtration systems from scraps of fabric and sand. By the end of the 3-day trial, the humans limped out of the fire waste scarred and exhausted, yet alive. Some alien champions had perished despite their powers, isolated and overconfident. Humanity had survived through cooperation, adaptation, and sheer will. The second trial was combat. Each species was tasked with fighting holographic enemies that mimicked real galactic predators. The Ka tore through theirs with savage claws. The Xorathi wielded song blades that pulsed with light. The Xorathi hive overwhelmed their foes with sheer regenerative endurance. When humanity's turn came, the council leaned forward, anticipating failure. The holographic enemies, a pack of 6-limbed hunters, pounced. The humans were weaker, slower, more fragile. Within minutes, 2 had broken bones, another was bleeding from a deep gash. The audience sneered. But something strange happened. The humans adapted mid-battle. They did not rely on brute force but strategy. They used the environment, toppling holographic boulders onto the hunters, luring them into narrow passages where only one could attack at a time. They shared information with constant shouts and signals, their coordination uncanny. One human, a former teacher from Nairobi named Elias, deliberately made himself bait, drawing the predator's attention and then sprinting toward a trap the team had set. His ribs broke when one beast slammed into him, but his sacrifice allowed the others to ambush and defeat the pack. The audience expected him to stay down. Instead, groaning and blooded, Elias stood again, leaning on a makeshift spear. The counselors fell silent. Even when fragile bodies were broken, these humans rose once more. The third trial was endurance, a trek through the void plains, where gravity fluctuated wildly, pulling and releasing in cycles that shattered bones and tested sanity. The car collapsed when gravity grew too light, unable to balance their heavy forms. The Xorathi struggled when the crushing heaviness pinned their wings. The Xorathi hive fared better, their bioengineered bodies adapting with painful slowness. The humans staggered, fell, and dragged themselves onward. They invented ways to move, crawling on all fours under heavy gravity, tying themselves together with makeshift ropes to prevent floating away in zero-gravity moments. They laughed at their own clumsiness, even as bones cracked and muscles screamed. It was not grace that carried them forward, nor power. It was persistence. By the time the final horn sounded, the counselors who had once mocked were silent. Not because humanity had dominated the trials, they hadn't. They had limped, bled, and nearly broken in every challenge. But they had never stopped. Where other species relied on powers and failed when those powers faltered, humans endured through creativity, cooperation, and refusal to surrender. In the mess halls that evening, alien champions glanced curiously at the humans. Some even approached. The Xorathi singer who had once mocked them sat beside Helena and said softly, "You are not strong. You are not fast. You are not gifted. Yet you endure. Why?" Helena smiled, weary but unbowed. "Because that is what we do. We fall, and we rise again. Over and over, until even the impossible bends." The trials had not crowned humanity as victors, but something more dangerous had been born, respect. And as whispers of the Xorathi invasion spread, the galaxy began to wonder if the weakest species among them possessed the one strength the enemy could not overcome. When the sky burned, the alarms rang across the council station before dawn. A trembling hum reverberated through the walls as the fleet scanners confirmed what everyone had dreaded: the Xorathi had arrived. They came as a swarm of living ships, vast, chitinous creatures fused with machinery, their wings stretching kilometers wide. The stars dimmed under their shadow. The Xorathi did not conquer through negotiation or treaties. They consumed. Worlds stripped bare, populations devoured, and nothing left behind but husks. The council chamber dissolved into chaos. The car demanded immediate combat, roaring their battle cries. The Xorathi proposed evacuation, unwilling to waste their shining warriors. The Seralith hissed that the war was already lost. And then, the humans, those fragile creatures who had barely survived the trials, stood up. "We'll fight," Helena Cross said, her voice steady even as the chamber roared with disbelief. The councillors sneered. "Fight? With what? Your brittle bones? Your laughable weapons?" But the humans had been watching, studying. While the others bickered over pride and strategy, humanity had been piecing together the fragments of knowledge they gathered during the trials, listening to stories of failed battles against the Xorathi. They knew the truth. No single species could defeat the swarm. The only hope was unity, and unity was something humanity understood better than most. The first battle. When the Xorathi ships pierced the outer defenses, the car launched headlong into combat. Their warships were enormous, bristling with cannons, and their warriors charged without hesitation. For a moment, it seemed as though their savagery could hold the line. But the Xorathi adapted. Their living ships absorbed the blasts, mutated, and struck back harder. The car fleet was torn apart. The Xorathi joined next, their radiant wings scattering beams of concentrated light. They sang battle hymns that shattered hulls and cracked enemy armor. The void glowed with dazzling brilliance. But brilliance could not last forever. Their voices faltered, their energy waned, and the swarm engulfed them. In the council chambers, despair spread like a sickness. Worlds were preparing to surrender. But then came the humans. They did not charge headlong. They did not shine with power. Instead, they observed. They coordinated. They listened. They noticed what the others had missed. The Xorathi ships were living creatures, bound by instinct. They moved like predators, not machines. Which meant they could be outwitted. The human gambit. Elias, the teacher from Nairobi, sat before a holotable, pointing at the enemy formations. "They're hunting in packs," he explained. "See how they isolate stragglers. They aren't expecting their prey to fight together." The humans began issuing orders, not just to their own small ships, but to the fleets of every allied species. At first, the car scoffed at taking commands from weaklings. The Xorathi refused, pride bristling. But when the humans' tactics saved 3 Seralith cruisers from being shredded, the council began to listen. Under human direction, the fleet stopped fighting as scattered individuals and began moving as a single organism. The Xorathi's light songs were no longer wasted on showy displays. They were used to signal formations and blind the swarm at critical moments. The car, once charging recklessly, were positioned as shock troops to break enemy clusters. The Seralith hive used their regenerative ships to shield weaker allies, absorbing blows while humanity guided the counterattacks. The galaxy had never fought this way before. For the first time in living memory, the Xorathi were not simply consuming, they were being outmaneuvered. The turning point. Still, victory was not assured. The human ships were fragile, their weapons primitive compared to others. During the battle, Helena's own vessel was struck, flames ripping through its hull. She stood among the smoke, coughing, but refused to abandon command. Over open channels, she spoke words that carried far beyond her ship. "You call us weak. You call us breakable. But listen well, the more you break us, the harder we fight. Humanity does not surrender. We endure, and we endure together. Follow us, and we will not fall." Her words spread through the fleet like wildfire. For the first time, the car roared not for themselves, but for all. The Xorathi sang not as individuals, but as a choir. The Seralith fought not for their hive, but for the galaxy. And the humans, the frail, ordinary humans, became the heart of a resistance that refused to die. By the battle's end, the Xorathi had been driven back, not destroyed, but forced into retreat, something no single species had ever achieved. The aftermath. In the silence that followed, the Council looked upon humanity with new eyes. The fragile ones, the powerless ones, had held the line where Titans failed. They had no superpowers. They had no unbreakable bodies or shining gifts. But they had something better, the ability to unite, to adapt, to endure when all others broke. And for the first time, the galaxy began to believe that the war against the Xorathi could be won, because humanity would never, ever give up.